Welcome back to the channel, and a very warm welcome to all new viewers who love hidden history, forgotten treasures, and the thrilling idea that something ordinary in your pocket could quietly be worth a fortune, because today we are diving deep into one of the most mysterious and talked about American coins ever imagined, the legendary 1929 no-mint mark 1 cent USA wheat coin. A penny that on the surface looks simple, worn, and unremarkable, yet in rare circumstances has been rumored, speculated, and passionately discussed among collectors as a coin that can reach an astonishing value of up to $29 million, not because every 1929 penny is rare, but because of a powerful combination of historical timing, subtle minting mistakes, metal anomalies, die errors, and extraordinary survival stories that transform a common copper cent into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. And as we begin this journey together, I want you to imagine holding a small brown coin struck nearly a century ago, minted at a time when America was standing on the edge of the Great Depression, when factories were running at full speed, quality control was stressed, and the U.S. Mint was producing millions upon millions of wheat cents with human hands, aging machinery, and imperfect processes, all of which created opportunities for rare and dramatic errors to slip through unnoticed. Errors that today fuel dreams, auctions, and intense debates across the numismatic world, because the 1929 wheat penny without a mint mark was struck in Philadelphia, the main mint facility, and Philadelphia coins traditionally carry no mint mark, making it impossible at first glance to separate an ordinary cent from one that might carry an extraordinary flaw, and that is where the magic truly begins, because the value does not come from the date alone, but from what went wrong during the moment of its birth. Starting with off-metal errors, one of the most powerful drivers of extreme valuation. Where a 1929 wheat cent might have been struck not on the standard bronze planchet but on a leftover blank intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin, resulting in a penny with incorrect weight, thickness, color, and metallic composition, a mistake that would have been nearly invisible during the chaotic production environment of the late 1920s. Especially when planchets were fed rapidly into presses and inspectors were focused on volume rather than perfection, and such off-metal strikes are among the most prized errors in all of American coinage because they represent a physical impossibility under normal conditions, meaning the mint was never supposed to create them, and when a genuine example surfaces, verified by advanced metallurgical testing, it becomes a centerpiece coin capable of commanding astronomical sums, particularly if it is unique, or one of only a handful known. Then there are double die errors, another cornerstone of legendary value, where the coin die itself was impressed more than once at slightly different angles, causing visible doubling on the date, lettering, or wheat stalks on the reverse, and while many minor double dies exist, a dramatic and previously undocumented double die from 1929 would instantly send shockwaves through the collecting community, especially if the doubling is bold, spread, and unmistakable. Because collectors chase what they can clearly see, and the more dramatic the error, the higher the emotional response. Bidding wars, and final hammer prices, and when you combine such doubling with pristine condition or a story of long-term concealment, such as a coin stored untouched in a family drawer for generations, the narrative itself adds to the value, because collectors do not just buy metal, they buy stories frozen in time. Another extraordinary possibility that pushes a 1929 no-mint mark wheat cent into the multi-million-dollar realm is a wrong alloy composition, particularly transitional metal errors. Where experimental or leftover alloy mixes were accidentally used, and while 1929 officially used bronze, the mint was constantly experimenting with compositions and dealing with recycled metal, which opens the door to anomalies such as higher tin content, unusual copper ratios, or even contamination with other metals that create distinct color shifts, magnetic responses, or weight differences. And these anomalies, once verified by professional grading services using non-destructive analysis, become some of the rarest and most desirable pieces in existence, because they represent not just a mistake, but a glimpse into the internal chaos and experimentation of the mint during a pivotal moment in American history. Then we move into striking errors, where the coin was struck incorrectly due to misaligned dies, weak strikes, or excessive pressure, resulting in broad strikes, off-center strikes. or partial designs that create visually stunning and unmistakable deviations from normal coins. And while many off-center strikes are relatively common, an extreme example combined with other factors such as an off-metal planchet or doubled die creates a compounding rarity effect, where each error multiplies the significance of the other, pushing value not linearly but exponentially. And this is where the theoretical $29 million valuation comes into discussion. Because in the highest tier of numismatics, uniqueness is king, and when a coin is believed to be one of one, the price is not determined by price guides, but by what a single determined collector is willing to pay to own something no one else on earth can possess. And we cannot talk about the 1929 wheat penny without discussing repunch dates and overdates, errors caused when mint workers manually punch dates into dies and sometimes misaligned or reused dies from previous years, leading to faint remnants of earlier numbers beneath the visible date. And while overdates are more famous in earlier centuries, the possibility of a subtle, previously unknown repunching on a 1929 die, detectable only under magnification, creates another layer of intrigue, because the discovery of a new variety instantly rewrites reference books, creates naming rights for the discoverer, and triggers intense competition among advanced collectors who want to secure the first and finest example. And condition plays an enormous role as well, because a high-grade 1929 wheat cent with a major error is exponentially more valuable than a worn example, since survival rates for pristine coins from circulation years are extremely low, especially during the Great Depression when coins circulated heavily and were rarely saved, meaning that a mint state error coin from 1929 is not just rare, it is statistically miraculous. And when professional grading services certify such a coin with top grades and clear attribution of errors, the market responds with explosive interest, sometimes fueled further by media attention, viral stories, and auction house marketing that frames the coin as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. And another fascinating angle is the possibility of experimental or presentation strikes, coins struck outside normal production either as tests or samples, which were never intended for circulation and sometimes escaped into private hands through mint employees or special distributions. And while documentation is scarce, the existence of such coins is well established in other years, making it plausible that an undocumented 1929 experimental wheat cent could surface, especially one with unusual finishes, proof-like surfaces, or sharp details inconsistent with standard business strikes, and such a discovery would instantly elevate the coin into legendary status. Then there is the human element, the role of chance, ignorance, and time. Because many of the most valuable coins in the world were not discovered in vaults or museums, but in jars, drawers, inherited collections, and even circulation, meaning the possibility, however slim, always exists that another extraordinary 1929 no-mint mark wheat cent is still out there, waiting to be noticed by someone who knows what to look for, and this belief fuels the constant search, the magnifying glasses, the scales, the magnet tests, and the submissions to grading services. Because the dream of finding a multi-million-dollar penny is not entirely fantasy, it is rooted in documented history where mistakes, oversights, and forgotten treasures have repeatedly surfaced, shocking experts and redefining what was thought possible, and the valuation of $29 million is not a casual claim, it represents the theoretical upper boundary where rarity, condition, uniqueness, historical significance, and collector desire converge into a perfect storm. Much like the most famous coins in existence that have shattered records and expectations. Next, 1917 no-mint mark 1 cent USA wheat coin, a humble penny born during a world at war, produced in an era of rapid industrial strain, human error, and imperfect minting technology, yet capable under extraordinary circumstances of reaching a jaw-dropping valuation of up to $23 million, not because every 1917 penny is rare, but because a tiny number of them were created with remarkable errors, unusual characteristics, and survival stories that transform common copper into legendary treasure. And as you settle in, imagine the United States in 1917, newly entering World War I, factories running non-stop, raw materials being diverted to the war effort, and the U.S. Mint under immense pressure to produce coinage quickly to support a growing economy, a perfect storm where speed often mattered more than precision. And this environment is exactly where numismatic miracles are born, because the 1917 wheat cent without a mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, the primary mint facility that produced enormous quantities of coins and traditionally used no mint mark, meaning millions of pennies look identical at first glance, making it incredibly difficult for an ordinary person to distinguish a priceless rarity from pocket change, and that invisibility is what allowed some of the most valuable errors to escape into circulation unnoticed. Starting with one of the most powerful drivers of extreme value in the coin world, the wrong planchet error, where a 1917 wheat cent could have been struck on a blank intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin, resulting in a penny with abnormal weight, thickness, color, and metallic composition, and because planchets were fed into presses manually and in bulk, mix-ups were not only possible but inevitable, and when such an error survives and is later authenticated using modern metallurgical analysis, it becomes a coin that should not exist, and in numismatics, impossibility is priceless. Then there are double die errors, created when the working die received more than one impression from the hub at slightly different angles, causing visible doubling in the date, lettering, or wheat ears, and while minor doubling is known in various years, a bold, dramatic double die from 1917 that was previously undocumented would instantly become one of the most important Lincoln cent varieties ever discovered. Because collectors crave clarity and strength in errors, and a strong double date, or motto visible to the naked eye creates emotional excitement that fuels intense bidding wars, especially if the coin is well preserved, because high-grade error coins from 1917 are incredibly rare due to heavy circulation during wartime, when coins were used relentlessly and rarely saved, pushing survival rates of mint-state examples close to zero. Another powerful possibility lies in alloy anomalies. Because although 1917 cents were officially struck in bronze, the mint frequently dealt with recycled metals, inconsistent alloy mixes, and contamination from other metal sources, which could result in cents with unusual copper ratios, elevated tin content, or trace elements that alter color, density, and magnetic response. And such anomalies often go unnoticed for decades until advanced testing reveals that a coin is fundamentally different from its peers, at which point it becomes a scientific artifact as much as a collectible, capable of commanding extraordinary prices from elite collectors who value uniqueness over tradition, and striking errors also play a massive role in pushing a 1917 wheat cent toward legendary status, including off-center strikes where the design is partially missing, broad strikes where the coin spreads beyond its normal diameter due to the absence of a retaining collar, and die cap errors where a coin becomes stuck to a die and repeatedly strikes other blanks, creating ghostly, distorted impressions. And while many such errors exist in later years, early examples from 1917 are significantly rarer, and when combined with other errors or exceptional condition, their value increases exponentially rather than incrementally, because rarity multiplied by rarity does not add, it explodes. And repunch dates are another fascinating area, because in 1917 the date was manually punched into dies, sometimes more than once, leading to misaligned digits, shadowing, or remnants of earlier impressions beneath the final date. And while some repunch varieties are subtle, the discovery of a bold, clearly visible repunch on a 1917 cent would instantly elevate it into elite status, rewriting reference books and creating a feeding frenzy among collectors who race to acquire the finest known example. And we must also consider the possibility of experimental or presentation strikes, coins struck outside standard production either as tests, samples, or internal references, which sometimes escaped into private hands through mint employees or special distributions. And although documentation is scarce, history has proven that such coins exist, and a proof-like, or unusually sharp 1917 wheat cent with surfaces inconsistent with normal circulation strikes would raise immediate red flags and immense excitement, especially if accompanied by unusual finish, mirror-like fields, or squared rims, and condition cannot be overstated. Because a pristine 1917 era cent is exponentially more valuable than a worn one, as most coins from that era were heavily circulated and exposed to harsh conditions, making the survival of a mint-state example nothing short of miraculous. And when professional grading services certify such a coin with high grades and clearly attribute its errors, the market responds with aggressive demand, often amplified by auction house storytelling, media coverage, and the psychological power of owning something irreplaceable. And the valuation of $23 million represents the theoretical peak where all these factors converge: uniqueness, condition, historical context, visual impact, and collector desire, similar to how the most famous coins in the world shattered expectations not because of metal content, but because of story, rarity, and timing, and the human element plays a critical role as well. Because many legendary coins were not discovered by experts but by ordinary people who inherited collections, searched old jars, or simply paid attention, reminding us that history often hides in plain sight, and this belief keeps collectors searching through rolls, estate sales, and forgotten boxes, driven by the knowledge that mistakes happened, records were incomplete, and extraordinary coins can still surface. And the 1917 no-mint mark wheat cent stands as a powerful reminder of why coin collecting captivates millions, not just for the dream of wealth, but for the connection to a turbulent moment in history, the thrill of discovery, and the understanding that even a small copper penny can carry the weight of war, industry, human error, and unimaginable value. And as we close today's story, remember that every coin deserves a second look, because somewhere among the ordinary, the extraordinary still waits, silent, overlooked, and potentially life-changing. Next, 1944 mint mark D 1 cent USA wheat coin, a penny that on the surface looks ordinary, familiar, and almost forgettable, yet under extremely rare and extraordinary circumstances has been discussed, debated, and revered as a coin capable of reaching a staggering value of up to $25 million, not because every 1944 D wheat penny is rare, but because a tiny handful were born from a perfect storm of wartime chaos, metal shortages, human error, and minting anomalies that transformed simple copper cents into some of the most valuable objects ever created by the United States Mint. And to truly understand how this is possible, we must first travel back to 1944, a year deeply etched into world history, as World War II raged across continents, consuming resources, manpower, and attention, while American factories ran day and night to support the war effort. And the U.S. Mint was no exception, operating under intense pressure to produce massive quantities of coinage needed to keep the economy functioning while simultaneously dealing with metal rationing, equipment wear, inexperienced labor, and rapidly changing production demands. And this environment is exactly where legendary minting mistakes are born, because when speed and volume outweigh perfection, extraordinary errors can and do escape into circulation, unnoticed for decades, waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered. And the 1944 D wheat penny was struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small D mint mark beneath the date, and while millions of normal bronze cents were produced that year, the true legend of the 1944 penny revolves around metal composition errors that directly resulted from wartime experimentation. Because just 1 year earlier in 1943 the U.S. Mint famously struck pennies in zinc-coated steel to conserve copper for the war. And when production returned to bronze in 1944, leftover steel planchets from 1943 remained in the minting facilities, creating the single most famous and valuable error category associated with this year, the 1944 wheat cent struck on a steel planchet. And while most people are familiar with the Philadelphia 1944 steel cent, the Denver Mint mark version is exponentially rarer, to the point where genuine examples are considered among the holy grails of American coin collecting, and it is precisely this rarity, combined with historical significance and unmistakable physical characteristics, that drives valuations into the multi-million-dollar range. Because a genuine 1944 D steel cent should not exist under normal minting procedures, yet history has proven that a few were accidentally struck when leftover steel blanks were fed into presses intended for bronze cents, producing a penny that appears silver gray, is magnetic, weighs significantly less than a normal copper cent, and instantly stands out to anyone who knows what to look for. And when such a coin is authenticated by top-tier grading services through metallurgical testing, dye analysis, and weight verification, it becomes not just rare but legendary, commanding prices that defy logic and rewrite auction records. and the $25 million valuation enters the conversation when collectors consider the extreme rarity of confirmed examples, the global demand among elite collectors, and the fact that ownership of such a coin places the holder into an exclusive club of perhaps only a handful of people on Earth. Then we must explore another extraordinary possibility: the 1944 DeWitt cent struck on a copper alloy intended for foreign coinage or experimental compositions, because during wartime the mint handled metal blanks for multiple purposes, including Allied nations, and mix-ups were far more likely than official records suggest, and such off-metal errors result in coins with unusual color tones, densities, and elemental compositions that can only be detected through advanced testing, and when verified, these coins become unique artifacts of wartime industrial confusion, capable of commanding astonishing sums due to their singular nature, and double die errors further add to the potential value of a 1944 DeWitt cent, created when the coin die received more than one misaligned impression from the hub, resulting in visible doubling on the date, motto, or wheat stalks, and while minor doubling exists across many years. A bold, dramatic double die from the Denver Mint in 1944, especially one combined with an off-metal strike or exceptional condition, would ignite intense competition among collectors, because dramatic visual errors are highly prized and easily recognized, making them desirable not only to advanced numismatists but also to investors seeking iconic pieces. And striking errors such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, and die caps further expand the realm of possibility. Because wartime equipment wear and inexperienced workers increase the likelihood of misaligned dies and mechanical failures, and while many minor errors were caught and destroyed, some escaped, and when an extreme striking error from 1944D survives in high grade, it becomes exponentially more valuable, especially if paired with other anomalies, because in the highest tier of collecting, rarity does not add, it multiplies, and repunched mint marks are another critical factor. Because mint marks were manually punched into dies during this era, sometimes more than once, leading to misaligned, doubled, or shadowed mint marks that create collectible varieties, and while many repunched mint marks are known, the discovery of a previously undocumented bold repunch on a 1944D cent would instantly elevate it into elite status, rewriting reference books and creating a frenzy among specialists who seek the finest and earliest discovered examples. And we must not overlook the possibility of transitional errors beyond steel planchets, including wrong-year planchets or experimental alloys that were never meant for circulation, because the mint's internal processes were far less controlled than modern systems, and documentation from the era is incomplete, meaning not every mistake was recorded or corrected, leaving room for extraordinary discoveries even today, and condition remains one of the most powerful amplifiers of value, because a pristine mint state 1944D era cent is extraordinarily rare, as coins from that era were heavily circulated, exposed to harsh conditions, and rarely saved, meaning that a high-grade example represents a statistical miracle, and when such a coin receives a top grade from a professional service, the market reacts with explosive demand, driven by the psychology of scarcity and the desire to own something irreplaceable, and the role of provenance cannot be overstated either, because a documented history of ownership, such as a coin discovered in a wartime collection, inherited from a mint worker, or held quietly for decades before surfacing, adds narrative power that collectors deeply value, sometimes pushing prices far beyond already staggering estimates, and the $25 million valuation is not a casual fantasy, but a reflection of what happens when extreme rarity, historical significance, visual impact, and collector desire collide in a global marketplace where ultra-wealthy collectors compete not just to own a coin, but to secure a place in history, and the human element is central to this story, because many of the world's most valuable coins were discovered by ordinary people who noticed something unusual, tested a coin with a magnet, weighed it, or simply refused to dismiss it as common, reminding us that extraordinary discoveries often begin with curiosity and attention to detail, and this belief fuels the ongoing search through old collections, inherited jars, estate sales, and forgotten boxes. Because as long as mistakes happened and records were imperfect, the possibility remains that Another legendary 1944 D wheat cent is still out there, waiting to be recognized. Next, 1945 No Mint Mark 1 cent USA wheat coin, a humble penny born at the exact moment the world was changing forever, struck during the final breath of World War II, and under extremely rare and extraordinary circumstances believed by collectors and experts to be capable of reaching a breathtaking valuation of up to $22 million, not because every 1945 penny is rare, but because a tiny number were created under chaotic conditions filled with metal shortages, exhausted machinery, rushed production, and human error, all of which opened the door for some of the most fascinating minting mistakes in American history. And to understand why this coin carries such enormous potential value, we must first step back into 1945, a year marked by victory, uncertainty, and transition. When the United States Mint was operating under intense pressure to meet the demands of a rapidly shifting economy as wartime production began to slow and normal civilian life attempted to resume, and during this period, quality control was strained. Experienced workers were replaced or assisted by temporary labor, and minting equipment that had been running non-stop for years was worn, misaligned, and overdue for maintenance, creating a perfect environment for rare errors to slip through unnoticed, and the 1945 wheat cent without a mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally used no mint mark, meaning millions of coins look identical at first glance, making it incredibly difficult to identify a rare and valuable example without close inspection, and this anonymity is exactly what allowed some extraordinary mistakes to escape into circulation, beginning with one of the most powerful error categories in numismatics, off-metal strikes, where a 1945 wheat cent may have been accidentally struck on a leftover steel planchet from 1943 or 1944, or on a blank intended for a foreign coin or another denomination entirely, resulting in a penny with abnormal color, weight, thickness, and metallic properties, and because the transition away from steel cents was still recent, leftover steel blanks were known to exist within mint facilities, making the accidental striking of a steel 1945 cent not just possible, but historically plausible, and when such a coin is authenticated and proven to be genuine through magnetism tests, weight analysis, and metallurgical verification, it becomes one of the rarest and most valuable Lincoln cents imaginable. Because it represents a mistake that should never have happened once wartime steel production officially ended, and this impossibility is what fuels multi-million-dollar valuations. Then there are alloy composition anomalies, another powerful driver of extreme value, because during 1945 the mint was melting and reusing massive quantities of metal, sometimes sourced from military scrap or recycled coinage, leading to the possibility of cents struck with incorrect copper-tin-zinc ratios, contaminated alloys, or experimental blends that produce unusual color tones, densities, and surface characteristics, and these anomalies often go unnoticed for decades until modern testing reveals that a coin is fundamentally different from every other example of its year, at which point it becomes a scientific curiosity as well as a collector's dream, capable of commanding astonishing prices from elite buyers who value uniqueness above all else. Doubled die errors also play a crucial role in the legend of the 1945 no mint mark wheat cent, created when the working die received more than one misaligned impression from the hub, resulting in visible doubling on the date, model, or wheat stalks, and while minor doubling exists in many years, a bold and dramatic double die from 1945, especially one that was previously undocumented, would instantly become one of the most important Lincoln cent varieties ever discovered, rewriting reference books and igniting intense competition among collectors worldwide, and striking errors further expand the realm of possibility, including off-center strikes where part of the design is missing, broad strikes where the coin spreads beyond its normal diameter due to the absence of a retaining collar, and die cap errors where a coin becomes stuck to a die and repeatedly strikes other blanks, creating ghostly, distorted impressions, and while these errors exist in later years, extreme examples from 1945 are significantly rarer due to high melt rates and quality control efforts as the mint prepared for peacetime production, making surviving examples incredibly desirable, especially when combined with other anomalies or high-grade preservation, and repunch dates are another fascinating area, because during this era dates were manually punched into dies, sometimes more than once, leading to misaligned digits, shadowing, or remnants of earlier impressions beneath the final date, and a bold repunched date on a 1945 cent would instantly elevate it into elite status, especially if the repunching is clearly visible without magnification, because collectors crave visual impact, and strong, obvious errors generate emotional excitement that drives bidding wars, and condition remains one of the most powerful amplifiers of value, because coins from 1945 circulated heavily as the economy surged after the war. Meaning most surviving examples are worn, scratched, or damaged, and the survival of a mint state-era coin from this year is statistically extraordinary, bordering on miraculous, and when professional grading services certify such a coin with high grades and clear error attribution, the market responds with explosive demand, often magnified by auction house storytelling, media coverage, and the psychological pull of owning something truly irreplaceable, and provenance plays a vital role as well, because a documented history of ownership, such as a coin discovered in a veteran's belongings, inherited from a mint worker, or stored untouched for decades in a family collection, adds emotional and historical weight that collectors deeply value, sometimes pushing prices far beyond already staggering estimates, and the $22 million valuation is not simply a fantasy number, but a theoretical peak where extreme rarity, historical timing, visual impact, condition, and global collector demand collide. Similar to how other legendary coins shattered expectations and redefined what was thought possible. In the numismatic market, and the human element is central to this story, because many of the world's most valuable coins were discovered not by experts, but by ordinary people who noticed something unusual, tested a coin with a magnet, weighed it, or simply refused to dismiss it as common, reminding us that extraordinary discoveries often begin with curiosity and attention to detail. And this belief keeps collectors searching through old jars, inherited boxes, estate sales, and forgotten collections, because as long as mistakes were made and records were imperfect, the possibility remains that another legendary 1945 no-mint mark-wheat cent is still out there, waiting to be recognized, and beyond its monetary value, this coin represents a tangible connection to a pivotal moment in human history, the end of a global war, the return of peace, and the resilience of an industrial nation. All captured in a small piece of metal that survived circulation, time, and neglect, and as we come to the end of today's journey, remember that every coin deserves a second look, because somewhere among the ordinary, the extraordinary still exists, silent, overlooked, and potentially life-changing. Next, 1957 mint marked the 1 cent USA wheat coin, a penny that most people would pass without a second glance, yet under exceptionally rare and specific circumstances has been discussed among advanced collectors as a coin capable of reaching an astonishing valuation of up to $19 million, not because every 1957 wheat penny is rare, but because a very small number were created during a period of intense production pressure, aging equipment, and human oversight, resulting in remarkable minting errors, metal anomalies, and strike irregularities that elevate a simple copper cent into the realm of legendary treasures, and to truly understand how such a value is even possible we must step back into the year 1957, a time when the United States was experiencing rapid economic growth, massive population expansion, and an unprecedented demand for circulating coinage, pushing the U.S. Mint to produce billions of coins at high speed, often prioritizing quantity over perfection. And this environment, while outwardly modern compared to earlier decades, was still deeply reliant on mechanical processes, manual inspections, and human judgment, which meant mistakes were inevitable, and when those mistakes escaped into circulation, they sometimes went unnoticed for decades, quietly aging in pockets, jars, and collections until rediscovered by someone who knew what to look for. And the 1957 wheat cent was struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small D mint mark beneath the date, and while millions were produced in standard bronze composition, the true value potential lies in rare deviations from the norm, beginning with off-metal and wrong planchet errors, where a 1957 cent could have been struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin, resulting in abnormal weight, thickness, and metallic composition. And during the 1950s, the Denver Mint handled a wide variety of coinage, increasing the possibility of planchet mix-ups, especially during high-volume production runs, and when such a coin is authenticated through precise weight measurements and metallurgical analysis, it becomes a physical impossibility under standard minting rules, and in numismatics, coins that should not exist are among the most valuable objects on Earth. Then there are alloy anomalies, another powerful driver of extreme value. Because although 1957 cents were officially struck in a consistent bronze alloy, variations in metal sourcing, recycling, and contamination could result in cents with unusual copper, tin, or zinc ratios, producing subtle differences in color, density, and surface texture that only modern testing can reveal, and once verified, such anomalies transform an ordinary-looking penny into a unique scientific artifact, desired by elite collectors who specialize in one-of-a-kind minting mistakes. And doubled die errors further fueled the legend of the 1957 DeWitt cent, created when the working die received more than one misaligned impression from the hub, resulting in visible doubling on the date, motto, or wheat ears, and while minor doubling exists in many years, a bold and dramatic double die from the Denver Mint in 1957, especially one previously undocumented, would instantly become a cornerstone variety, rewriting reference books and igniting intense competition among collectors. Because strong visual errors create emotional excitement and are easily recognized, making them highly desirable even to non-specialists, and striking errors such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, and die caps also play a significant role, because worn dies, misaligned presses, and mechanical fatigue increase the likelihood of such errors during periods of heavy production, and while many minor striking errors were caught and destroyed, extreme examples escaped. And when a 1957 D cent shows a dramatic strike error combined with high-grade preservation, its value increases exponentially. Especially if paired with another anomaly such as a double die or off-metal composition, and repunched mint marks are another important factor, because during this era mint marks were still manually punched into dies, sometimes more than once, leading to doubled, tilted, or shadowed mint marks that create collectible varieties. And while some repunched mint marks from 1957 are known, the discovery of a bold, previously undocumented repunch would instantly elevate a coin into elite status. Particularly if the repunching is clearly visible without magnification, because collectors place immense value on clarity and strength of error, and condition remains a critical amplifier of value, because by 1957 coins circulated heavily in a booming consumer economy, meaning most surviving cents are worn, scratched, or damaged. And the survival of a mint state era coin from this year is statistically rare, and when such a coin is certified by professional grading services with high grades and clear error attribution, the market responds with aggressive demand driven by the psychology of scarcity and the desire to own something truly irreplaceable, and provenance can further elevate value, because a documented history of ownership, such as a coin discovered in an original mint roll, inherited from a former mint employee, or stored untouched in a private collection for decades, adds narrative power that collectors deeply value, sometimes pushing prices far beyond already remarkable estimates, and the $19 million valuation represents the theoretical peak where extreme rarity, condition, visual impact, historical context, and global collector demand converge, similar to how other legendary coins shattered expectations not because of face value, but because of story, uniqueness, and timing, and the human element remains central to this story. Because many of the world's most valuable coins were discovered not by professionals, but by ordinary people who paid attention, weighed a coin, tested it, or simply noticed that something felt different, reminding us that extraordinary discoveries often begin with curiosity and patience, and this belief fuels the ongoing search through old jars, inherited boxes, estate sales, and forgotten collections, because as long as mistakes were made and records were imperfect, the possibility remains that another legendary 1957 DeWitt cent is still out there, waiting to be recognized, and beyond its monetary value, this coin represents a tangible connection to mid-century America, a time of optimism, growth, and industrial power, captured in a small piece of copper that survived circulation, time, and neglect. And as we come to the end of today's journey, remember that every coin deserves a second look, because somewhere among the ordinary, the extraordinary still exists, silent, overlooked, and potentially life-changing. Next, 1958 No Mint Mark 1 cent USA wheat coin, a penny that appears ordinary at first glance, produced in massive numbers and used in daily life by millions of Americans, yet under extraordinarily rare circumstances has been discussed among serious collectors as a coin capable of reaching a staggering value of up to $17 million, not because every 1958 wheat penny is rare, but because a very small number were created at the exact crossroads of change, pressure, and imperfection within the United States Mint, resulting in exceptional errors, anomalies, and survival stories that elevate a simple copper cent into legendary status. And to truly understand how this is even possible, we must step back into 1958, the final year of the iconic wheat cent design, a year charged with transition, as the Lincoln Memorial reverse was already planned for 1959. Meaning the Mint was producing wheat cents at enormous speed while simultaneously preparing for a historic design change, a situation that placed immense strain on equipment, personnel, and quality control systems. And when speed and volume dominate production priorities, the door opens for rare and dramatic mistakes to slip through unnoticed, and the 1958 wheat cent without a mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally used no mint mark, making these coins outwardly indistinguishable from millions of ordinary examples. And this anonymity is precisely what allowed some extraordinary errors to escape detection, pass through circulation, and survive for decades before being rediscovered, starting with one of the most powerful and famous error categories associated with this year, the double die obverse, which is not only real but widely recognized as one of the most dramatic doubled dies in Lincoln cent history, where the date, lettering, and motto show strong, unmistakable doubling that can be seen without magnification, and while known examples already command enormous sums, the possibility of a previously undiscovered die state, an even bolder impression, or a pristine high-grade survivor creates a scenario where values can skyrocket into the multi-million-dollar range, especially when collectors consider that this error occurred in the final year of the wheat cent, giving it symbolic importance as the last great wheat penny mistake, and beyond doubled dies. Alloy composition anomalies play a significant role in driving extreme valuations, because although 1958 cents were officially struck in a standard bronze alloy, the Mint was melting, recycling, and sourcing metal at industrial scale, increasing the risk of contamination or incorrect alloy mixtures that could result in cents with unusual copper, tin, or zinc ratios, producing subtle differences in color, density, weight, and surface texture that might go unnoticed for decades until modern metallurgical testing reveals the truth. And once verified, such a coin becomes not just rare but scientifically unique, a one-of-one artifact that represents a moment when industrial processes failed in a way that can never be repeated. And in numismatics, uniqueness carries a value that cannot be measured by price guides. Then there are off-metal and wrong planchet errors, another extraordinary possibility, where a 1958 wheat cent could have been struck on a blank intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin, resulting in abnormal thickness, weight, and metallic behavior. And while such errors are rare in later years, they are far from impossible, especially during high-volume production periods when multiple coin types were being handled simultaneously, and when a genuine off-metal 1958 no-mint mark wheat cent is authenticated by professional grading services using advanced testing, it becomes a coin that should not exist under official mint rules. And coins that defy the rules of their own creation are among the most valuable objects in the hobby. Striking errors further expand the realm of possibility, including off-center strikes where part of the design is missing, broad strikes where the coin spreads beyond its intended diameter due to collar failure, and die cap errors where a coin becomes stuck to a die and repeatedly strikes other blanks, creating distorted, ghost-like impressions. And while many minor striking errors exist, extreme examples from 1958 are significantly rarer than people assume, because quality control was improving during this period. Meaning the most dramatic errors were often caught and destroyed, making surviving examples exceptionally valuable. especially when combined with other anomalies or high-grade preservation, and repunch dates are another intriguing factor, because although the minting process was becoming more modern, dates were still subject to manual adjustments and die refinishing, creating the possibility of misaligned digits, shadowing, or remnants of earlier impressions beneath the final date, and a bold, clearly visible repunch date on a 1958 wheat cent would instantly elevate it into elite status, particularly if it represents a previously undocumented variety, because new discoveries rewrite reference books and create immediate demand from collectors who want to own the first and finest known example, and condition remains one of the most powerful amplifiers of value. Because by 1958 America was experiencing rapid economic growth and heavy coin circulation, meaning most wheat cents from this year are worn, scratched, or damaged, and the survival of a mint state-era coin from 1958 is statistically rare, bordering on miraculous, and when such a coin receives a high grade from a professional grading service and is clearly attributed as an error or major variety, the market responds with explosive demand, driven by scarcity, competition, and the emotional pull of owning something truly irreplaceable, and provenance adds another layer of value, because a documented history of ownership, such as a coin discovered in an original mint roll, inherited from a long-held family collection, or stored untouched for decades before being recognized, adds narrative power that collectors deeply value, often pushing prices far beyond already extraordinary estimates, and the $17 million valuation represents the theoretical point where rarity, historical timing, visual impact, condition, and global collector desire converge, similar to how other legendary coins shattered expectations not because of face value, but because of story, symbolism, and uniqueness, and the human element remains central to this story, because many of the most valuable coins in the world were discovered not by experts but by ordinary people who noticed something unusual, weighed a coin, examined it closely, or simply refused to ignore their curiosity, reminding us that extraordinary discoveries often begin with attention and patience, and this belief fuels the ongoing search. Through old jars, inherited boxes, estate sales, and forgotten collections, because as long as mistakes were made and records were imperfect, the possibility remains that another extraordinary 1958 no-mint mark wheat cent is still out there, waiting to be recognized, and beyond its monetary value, this coin represents the end of an era, the final chapter of the wheat cent story. A design that circulated through world wars, economic collapse, recovery, and transformation, all captured in a small piece of copper that survived circulation, time, and neglect. And as we reach the end of today's journey, remember that every coin deserves a second look, because somewhere among the ordinary, the extraordinary still exists, silent, overlooked, and potentially life-changing. Next, 1930 mint mark D 1 cent USA wheat coin, a humble copper penny struck during one of the most dramatic turning points in American history, the early days of the Great Depression, and under exceptionally rare and specific circumstances discussed among advanced collectors as a coin capable of reaching a staggering valuation of up to $22 million. Not because every 1930 D wheat penny is rare, but because a tiny number were born from a perfect storm of economic pressure, rushed production, aging minting equipment, and human error, all of which created opportunities for remarkable minting mistakes that quietly slipped into circulation and survived for decades unnoticed. And to understand how such an extraordinary value is even imaginable, we must first step back into the year 1930, a time when the American economy was collapsing, banks were failing, unemployment was rising, and the U.S. Mint was under immense pressure to keep producing coinage to support commerce during uncertainty, often prioritizing speed and volume over meticulous quality control, and this environment, filled with stress and urgency, is exactly where numismatic legends are born, because when millions of coins are produced quickly using worn dies and overworked presses, mistakes are inevitable, and some of those mistakes escape detection and later become priceless artifacts of history. And the 1930 wheat cent with the D mint mark was struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small d beneath the date. And while millions of normal examples were produced, the Denver Mint during this period was still refining its processes, relying heavily on manual die preparation and visual inspections, which meant errors could and did occur, beginning with one of the most powerful drivers of extreme value in the coin world, wrong planchet and off-metal strikes. Where a 1930 wheat cent may have been accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination, or even a foreign coin, resulting in abnormal weight, thickness, color, and metallic composition, and because planchets were often stored and handled in bulk, mix-ups were entirely possible, especially during periods of high output and limited oversight, and when such a coin is authenticated through precise weight measurements and metallurgical testing, it becomes something that should not exist under official minting rules, and in numismatics. Coins that break the rules of their own creation are among the most valuable objects on Earth. Then there are alloy composition anomalies, another critical factor that can push a 1930 wheat cent into legendary territory, because although cents of this era were officially struck in bronze, the mint frequently recycled metal and dealt with inconsistent alloy batches, leading to the possibility of cents struck with unusual copper, tin, or zinc ratios, producing subtle but measurable differences in density, color, and surface texture, and such anomalies often go unnoticed for decades until modern scientific testing reveals that a coin is fundamentally different from all others of its year, instantly transforming it into a unique artifact that collectors fiercely compete to own, and double die errors further fuel the story of extreme valuation, created when the working die received more than one misaligned impression from the hub, resulting in visible doubling on the date, lettering, or wheat stalks, and while minor doubling exists across many years, a bold and dramatic double die from the Denver Mint in 1930, especially one previously undocumented, would instantly become one of the most important Lincoln cent varieties ever discovered, rewriting reference books and igniting intense bidding wars among collectors worldwide, because strong visual errors are emotionally powerful and easily recognized, making them highly desirable even beyond specialist circles, and striking errors such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, and die cap errors add further layers of rarity and intrigue, because worn equipment and misaligned presses during the Depression-era production runs increased the likelihood of such mistakes, and while many were caught and destroyed, extreme examples escaped, and when a dramatic strike error from 1930 survives in high-grade condition, its value increases exponentially, especially if paired with another anomaly such as a double die or off-metal composition, and repunched mint marks are another fascinating contributor to value, because during this era mint marks were manually punched into dies, sometimes more than once, leading to doubled, tilted, or shadowed mint marks that create collectible varieties, and a bold, clearly visible repunched mint mark on a 1930 cent would instantly elevate it into elite status, particularly if it represents a new or rare die variety. Because collectors place immense value on clarity, strength, and discovery, and condition remains one of the most powerful amplifiers of value, because during the Great Depression coins circulated heavily as people relied on every cent they had, meaning most surviving examples are worn, scratched, or damaged, and the survival of a mint state-era coin from 1930 is statistically extraordinary, and when such a coin is certified by a professional grading service with a high grade and clear error attribution, the market responds with explosive demand driven by scarcity, competition, and the desire to own something truly irreplaceable, and provenance can elevate value even further, because a documented history of ownership, such as a coin discovered in an old bankroll, inherited from a family member who lived through the Depression, or stored untouched for decades in a forgotten collection, adds emotional and historical depth that collectors deeply value, sometimes pushing prices far beyond already staggering estimates. And the $22 million valuation represents the theoretical peak where extreme rarity, historical timing, visual impact, condition, and global collector demand converge, similar to how other legendary coins shattered expectations not because of face value, but because of story, symbolism, and uniqueness. And the human element remains central to this story, because many of the world's most valuable coins were discovered not by experts, but by ordinary people who noticed something unusual, weighed a coin, examined it closely, or simply trusted their curiosity, reminding us that extraordinary discoveries often begin with attention and patience, and this belief fuels the ongoing search through old jars, inherited boxes, estate sales, and forgotten collections, because as long as mistakes were made and records were imperfect, the possibility remains that another extraordinary 1930 wheat cent is still out there, waiting to be recognized, and beyond its monetary value. This coin represents a powerful snapshot of American history, a nation struggling through economic collapse yet continuing to produce the small objects that kept daily life moving, all captured in a single piece of copper that survived hardship, circulation, and time. And as we reach the end of today's journey, remember that every coin deserves a second look, because somewhere among the ordinary, the extraordinary still exists, silent, overlooked, and potentially life-changing.